Jeremy was wrong. Hi guys, Eric here and welcome back to my channel. Today we will be having a look at my very own 2006 Nissan 350Z Roadster. When this car was launched, Jeremy Clarkson of Top Gear fame absolutely ripped this thing apart. Now, even though this isn't brand new or in perfect condition, I fell in love with it. Let me explain why. If you live in the Western Cape and you have an original car in good condition you would like me to review, please get in touch. There's an email address in the description box below. It all started back in 1969 when Nissan introduced the first generation Z car to take on the Toyota Celica, the 240Z, or Fairlady Z in Japan. In Japan, it featured a 2-litre inline-6 engine that produced 97 kilowatt, while in the United States, it boasted a 2.4-litre straight-6 producing 112 to 120 kilowatt, depending on the source data. It also produced 198 Nm of torque. Now that might not sound like much, but it was more than enough for the time. It was a huge success thanks to attractive styling by Yoshihiko Matsuo and relatively low cost. Nissan could keep the cost down because they used certain parts that were already being produced for other Nissan models. And that's why, kids, the Aston Martin DB7 had a Mark 1 MX-5 door handle. The 260Z, a facelift of the 240, was released in 1974. In the United States at least, power from the 2.6-litre inline-6 dropped to 104 kilowatt to meet US emission regulations. Yay for environment, boo for car. The US also received a 280Z that came equipped with fuel injection, 112 to 127 kilowatt, and a 5-speed manual gearbox. Outside of America, we had to wait for the 280ZX in 1978, the official second-generation Z car. This was the first time that Nissan offered turbocharging on the Halo cars, on both the 2-litre for Japan and the 2.8-litre for export markets. This was necessary as the normally aspirated 2.8 produced only 103 kilowatt and at the same time grew a lot heavier. With the turbo fitted, power jumped to 132 kilowatt. Torque also shot up to 274 Newton meters. While it was praised for its performance and comfort, many believed it has lost its fun factor, becoming more of a GT car. That didn't harm sales though, which makes sense, cause America. The Mark 1 300ZX replaced the 280 in 1984, being available with either a turbocharged or naturally aspirated 3-litre straight 6. Power ranged from 120 kilowatt for the naturally aspirated engine and 150 to 170 kilowatt for the turbo. It was during this time that the brand changed its name officially from Datsun to Nissan. The Mark II 300ZX was introduced in 1990. It retained the 3-litre inline-6 from its predecessor, but the engine became equipped with variable valve timing and dual overhead cams, so power was a very decent 166 kilowatt, and this was only for the naturally aspirated engine. The turbo had an output of 220 kilowatt, an amazing number for the time. It also won numerous awards and had advanced technologies fitted, even by today's standards. It was equipped with 4-wheel steering, for heaven's sake. Because of the poor yen to dollar exchange rates, the price of the 300ZX went up considerably, ultimately ceasing sales in the US in 1996. It continued production in other markets though until 2000. At first, it was thought that the Z cars would be done forever, but Nissan went back to the drawing board instead, unveiling the 240Z concept in 1999. It was only in 2002 that the brand new 350Z was released to the public though. You can immediately tell that Nissan wanted to make the new model a driver's car. It looks far more purposeful, even in this Roadster form, which was released in 2004. In this particular car, the 3.5-litre VQ engine produces 206 kilowatts and 363 newton meters of torque. That is enough to power this thing from 0 to 100 in 6.7 seconds, according to cars.co.za. It does feel a lot quicker though, but we will get back to that. Focusing on the looks, I personally love the design of the 350. It looks menacing yet friendly. It has really clean lines as well. It has very much the same design language of the Nissan Murano of the time. It looks hyper-modern, almost like a concept car. I personally prefer the look of the coupe, especially in profile, but you can't deny the appeal of having a convertible sports car. Also, with the roof down, you can easily hear that stunning engine noise while driving. What is the interior like though? Usually, a car's exterior isn't nearly as important to me than its interior, which is why at one stage I actually considered an Audi A8, even though the outside looks almost exactly like the much cheaper A4. When it comes to the cabin though, the 350Z leaves something to be desired. Not because it's terrible, not at all. There's some soft touch plastics on the dash as well as the doors. Nor is it terrible build quality. There's some flimsy parts, but everything fits together quite well. The general design is even suitably sporty and exciting. It's only when you start looking a bit closer that you notice some oddities. The steering wheel, for instance, is adjustable for rake, but not reach. The door pockets are comically small. You have to manually whir the front seat forward if you want to access the relocated glove box. And this lid on the dash feels extremely flimsy. There's more. There's only one cup holder for the two passengers. The climate controls really belong on an old bakkie, and the hazards button can be quite tricky to use while driving. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let me tell you why this cabin rocks. Starting with the door panel. The design is very clean with very few curves. It's also quite premium, with the top of the doors finished in a soft textured plastic. One of my favorite details is how the metal door handle mimics the design of the door-mounted air vent. The well-padded door armrest is on the same design line as the window switches, which do feel a bit cheap, but that is standard for cars of this age. The doors might not close with a reassuring thud that you might expect, probably because of the lack of a window frame, but there is an amazing Easter egg. When the door is open, you will find a Z letter on the vent that sends air to the door-mounted air vent. I love things like that. The steering wheel is definitely of its time. It's a rather flat, uninspired design. Its rim is wrapped in leather and you have two silver pieces that accent the top two spokes. Wow. The buttons for the cruise control feel a tad cheap, and there aren't any buttons for the stereo, but this is to be expected from a car of its age. One detail that I really like though is the Z logo, as opposed to the Nissan emblem we're used to. The stalks look great and they are easy to understand. The only problem is they don't provide much in the way of resistance, so it can be tricky to indicate with a half push without having to disengage the indicators manually. The dials, however, are almost perfect for a sports car. You get a giant rev counter front and center with two other circles on either side, one of which houses the speedometer and trip A information, and the other side has your fuel gauge as well as water temperature gauge. The only criticism I have is that I don't like the yellow digits. I would have personally preferred white. Thankfully, in true sports car fashion, you get three auxiliary gauges housed in pods and placed on top of the dashboard. From the left, it communicates battery voltage, oil pressure, and a blackout LCD display that communicates trip information. Move your gaze downwards and you will find the stereo unit. Now, this is an aftermarket Sony system, but the original unit had a CD player as well as a tape deck player. Talk about a blast from the past. The standard fit Bose sound system performs really well in that it is extremely loud, but it lacks a bit of bass in my opinion, even though the subwoofer is located right behind the driver. Now for the climate controls. They are really easy to understand, which is great, but they feel extremely cheap. I haven't been this disappointed in a knob since 2011's Pride Parade. The same can't be said about the gear lever though. It is short, it is stubby, and it is a joy to use. This particular one might look a bit weathered, but it still brings a smile to my face every time I use it. These seats are one of my favorite things about the 350Z. They are supremely comfortable as well as supportive. They are also partially electrically adjustable, so it's quite easy to find a comfortable driving position, which is necessary considering you don't have reach support for the steering column. It can be a tad uncomfortable for larger people, however, because they are quite narrow. Also, you can't adjust for lumbar support, and the passenger seat can't be adjusted for height. With the design out of the way, let's talk practicality. Considering this is a sports car, the 350Z does really well when it comes to its storage solutions. Provided you don't have the navigation system fitted, you get a compartment that is felt-lined in the dashboard, a single cup holder protruding out of the dash and kind of reminds me of R2-D2's arm, an ashtray, of course, a tray compartment underneath the center armrest, a big lockable compartment behind the passenger seat, as well as two closable compartments in between the driver and passenger. The only problem I have is that there's no quick way to get the passenger seat out of the way to access this compartment behind it, limiting its practicality a bit. There aren't any rear seats either, but look at this roof mechanism. All you have to do is turn on the ignition, press this button up here and pull the lever. Then with your foot on the brake, there's a button next to the steering wheel that says open and close. Press the open button and it will retract automatically. It might take a while though. The best thing about this roof mechanism is that it never eats into boot space. The bad side though is that the boot is always small, whether the roof is up or down. It's only 116 litres, so enough for a weekend getaway, but absolutely nothing more. Now for the fun part, the driving experience. This is going to be quite tricky for me to stay unbiased, but I promise I will do my very best. Starting with navigating the urban jungle. Well, to me it is no more difficult to pilot the 350Z than any other hatchback. It might be a tad wide, but it isn't too long and you get a good idea where the car's front corners are. The clutch is very light and the steering mercifully follows suit. Even the Brembo brakes feel progressive. Then there is the engine. It is extremely powerful, so weaving in and out of lanes during rush hour traffic will not be a problem. There is a problem though. Visibility. With the roof erected, there are two major blind spots where the B-pillars would have been, so reversing can be quite a challenge. Out on the open road and with the roof erect, there is quite a bit of rattles emanating from the roof mechanism, but it is by no means unacceptable. The engine is more than strong enough to overtake when the opportunity arises though, and the suspension is really comfortable. I really love these seats. This car can actually make quite a good long distance cruiser. Out on the twisties and the 350Z becomes alive. This right here is why I think this car is such a bargain. The steering is extremely direct and provides excellent feedback. There is very little body roll in the corners, especially considering the weight of this thing. And the Brembo brakes feel really strong, and it doesn't fade too quickly. The only thing to keep in mind though is that even with the stability control, this car loves to play. It is like a Jack Russell on speed, so be mindful that during cornering you don't urge its tail out. If you're in the market for a 350Z, you might also want to consider some of its rivals. First one that comes to mind is the first or second generation Audi TT. Even by today's standards, they look great and the interiors are excellent. You do have to deal with Audi maintenance prices though, and they aren't quite as much fun to drive in my opinion. There's also the Mark 1 Z4. They have excellent engines, but their manual transmissions aren't the best, and they are expensive to maintain as well. Lastly, you can opt for the Chrysler Crossfire, but don't. Just don't. Don't. The 350Z exceeded my expectations, and then some. When I was looking for a sporty roadster, I wasn't even really considering this car, until I saw the prices they were going for used. When I test drove one, it was settled. I must have one, and so should you. Thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. If you enjoyed it, please remember to give it a thumbs up, as it makes the world of difference for my channel. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe and get notified of later videos. I have some very, very exciting things coming up, so stay tuned. Until next time, bye.